get around. Yeah.
Enough about that kind of crap. Let's call the meeting to order. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Belter,
Here.
Birmingham,
Here.
Cummings,
Here.
Hintz,
Here.
Lasky,
Here.
Stan.
Here. Okay, first order of business is turning over of gavel from Chairman Belter, that's me, to Mayor Cummings as chairman. Steve, as Captain Kirk would say, we need you to take the helm.
Let me go up there and get that gavel that I was working on last.
You have no gavels here.
Well, kind of bear with me as I go through this. It's my first time, obviously. We're at the consent on the agenda and approval of minutes from the March 25th, 2015.
Just look a little.
Have to do election of vice chairman.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, hello.
Or for election.
Nominate Tom Belter.
I'll second that.
Any other motions? Hearing none, motion's closed.
Call the question.
Vote, yeah, call the question
Call the question.
And we take the roll.
on that. Sure.
Do we need to
No,
roll?
I don't think you do.
No, we don't think so.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain?
Abstain?
Now we can move to the approval of the minutes from the March 25th, 2015 meeting.
Move approval?
Second.
Discussion? Roll, please.
No, we can just do
We, I
voice.
was gonna say,
You can do voice.
We do it
on
voice
consent
vote.
agenda
Okay.
too, yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
A little different than council. Under new business, 15-03, support restoration of Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund proposed to be eliminated, drastically cut in 2015-2016 state budget.
I move approval of 15-03.
Second. Discussion?
This was actually my idea. When you look at how much this grant has helped us complete the Riverwalk to our current status, it is, without these funds, we'd probably have 2, maybe 3 segments done. Without these funds going forward, it might be literally 2020 before we can afford to build this out of the city's budget until the TIF construction monies are able to fund some of these large segments. So any assistance we can get from any agency at the state level or federal level, we really need in order to have this go forward. So certainly, I'm not sure what our letter will do, but we really need this to have our Riverwalk completed.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the council was talking about having a legislative meeting coming up relatively soon, and this is probably worth one of the agenda items. Both the RDA and the council probably are of similar mind in keeping those stewardship funds for Riverwalk development, remediation, and spurring economic development and private investment all along the riverfront. And I think it's important that the council and the RDA both go on record to let the legislative members know that it's important for economic development and jobs in the city of Oshkosh.
I believe we gave direction last night to try to do this meeting as quickly as we can. I think hopefully sometime in May.
Yeah.
From what I hear on joint finance, everything does make a difference. But I think there really are 2 aspects to it. You know, one is the length of time that it would be before any monies would be expended, and they're talking about 2028. And that is, in effect, a death sentence for the program. To do that, I think probably the best possibility is simply to anticipate that there would be fairly substantial cuts, but not to freeze it, with the idea that perhaps in subsequent years, when the budget is not quite so tight, that it's still alive. So those would be points to emphasize.
Maybe we can help them if you show how much a small investment makes for ultimate tax assessed value increase. The payback on these monies is really pretty short term. So
Right, and we have pretty good arguments here. pretty good case.
Where does this go, I guess is my question. I think we need to plaster it wherever we can send it, and not necessarily wait for it to be an item in a packet sent by council and everybody else in town. So that's my thoughts.
Mark, would this go as a resolution as we've done before?
This is specifically a I mean, it looks like it's a resolution, so that would be a resolution. Alan and I did talk. One of the things that we've been coached on from the League of Municipalities is to focus on economic development and jobs, and there's, I think, a clear nexus between what we've been doing with the stewardship funds and economic development. Both of our local legislators in the Assembly are on joint finance, so I would think that in addition to us, individually, if any of you can call, if you have any pull with those legislators, I don't know, Mr. Hintz, if you have any pull, but if you could use whatever influence you have, laundry, dinner at home, anything.
Yeah.
But certainly any influence that any RDA members could share with our local legislators. I mean, we are fortunate enough to have 2 legislators on joint finance, so any influence you can do would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Typically send this to both Assembly and Senate representatives, just
Right.
face-to-face, I think, might be more effective as time goes by, so.
Any further discussion? Take the roll.
Lasky.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
Belter.
Aye.
Birmingham.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Carried 6.
Move to 15-04, approve land disposition to City of Oshkosh for Marion Road Water Tower relocation.
I'll move approval of 15-04.
Second.
I'll second it.
Discussion?
Quite a discussion at the previous RDA meeting, and there were some items that were not fully investigated, so the RDA asked staff to look into some of those items. 2 specifically were UW Oshkosh sites, and the other was the potential for the Lamico site. And I think you'll find in the memo that Mr. Patek prepared that he did follow up with UW Oshkosh, and he did follow up on the information that Mr. Belter was able to provide regarding the Lamico site. And information answered the questions at least we had that were asked at the previous RDA meeting, but we have the same staff available here for any follow-up questions regarding any of the alternatives, potential costs, the advantages and disadvantages for different sites, both physical, monetary, and effect on the water system. Based on that information, we're happy to answer any further questions that you might have regarding the question before us.
I do have a question, and that is, what is the value of the property that we're looking at giving?
Right now, there is no value since it's owned by the RDA, but typically it's assessed for $5 a square foot once it's in private ownership, so that's where we came down with the $5 a square foot.
But as I meant, our cost is $13 a square foot, so the
Yes.
city paid $13 a foot for that property. So really, if we're conveying it, you'd be really misrepresentative to convey it at less than cost, in my opinion. Well, that's what we paid for it.
Yes.
That I understand.
I should probably weigh in here, because it's all my fault that we went through a lot of this maneuvering. So really, thank you for doing some background work. And I was just trying to get probably 2 things done with one maneuver. If we could eliminate a blighted property, take down some metal pipes and empty buildings, and really have it be cost neutral, we'd get 2 things done with one project versus having still to do whatever we're going to have to do with a Lamico project. So I don't know that it's necessarily a cost recommendation, since we just use estimates. If we truly wanted to have it come down to cost, why don't we just wait for the actual bids, and then we can determine if the cost for the Lamico maneuver is less than the $220,000 of land cost. But I think it seems to be more than that, and I don't mean to go against the city staff recommendations. If that's, in their opinion, the highest and best place for that water tower to be located, that's, they know more than I do, so. So thank you for doing that, at least some of the background work.
Good question. The last RDA meeting for the discussion, so gave us an opportunity to investigate it and give you the information.
I guess I should ask that question. If this was a lower cost than the $220,000 land cost in the Marion Road project, would we prefer to put it in the Lamico site?
I think that's one consideration. I don't know that that's the answer. I think it's a consideration.
Right.
And so, all things considered, I respect the city's view of the proposed location. Quite frankly, I'd prefer to see somebody stand up and kind of go through, is that this area?
Yes, that's
And kind of show, somebody visually show these two, the difference between these areas?
the two
Yeah.
sites.
Yeah.
I think we have a handout that's prepared that they'll give you, actually
That'd be
scaled off, that shows the square footage and relationship of the sites. So is that kind of,
Yeah, it's right from there, so.
My only reason for saying all things considered is because the area that the city has proposed is tucked away off of the street. And for that reason, aesthetically, for the area, I do respect the city's opinion on their proposed location.
Yeah, I'd confer with Mr. Olasky's comments that, my sense is that the Lamico property without a tower on it is going to sell for more than, I think our combined attractiveness of the property is better to put it at the site selected by the city than it is to move it up front.
and again, just to clarify, is that our intent was to maintain two sites. Having the opportunity to move it to the proposed site in, we currently have, that would give us flexibility, should something happen with the property, to develop, for us to get out of the middle of the piece of property and quite possibly move to a back corner closer to the adjacent property and make that site more attractive for development by being able to turn that into one continuous parcel with just a square at, I would say, circled at the north corner potentially, which is something we certainly can do in the future if we have the opportunity to build on the RDA site.
Is the water tower now in the way of the straight extension of whatever, Riverway or whatever that street is called, coming off of Pearl?
No,
No?
no,
So we could leave it where it is and still put the street through, correct?
correct.
Okay.
There's a,
Okay, the picture is taken at an angle, so it...
right, so it's not at perfect, it
So,
is,
so what's the cost difference between just rebuilding it where it is and moving it to this new site? Does anybody know?
it would be the cost of the property,
The cost of the proposed tower site?
correct, and about 140 feet of 12-inch pipe.
Okay.
And apparently public safety risk as well.
Exactly. That's one of the underpinning reasons we would like to do this, is because, as we've discussed it with the fire chief, and he can verify this, as we're in the most vulnerable area of the city right now with the location of that tower. And by having the existing tower taken out of service for a period of about a year in order to rebuild it, we're going to be increasing the exposure in that area and reducing the amount of fire protection. So, that is definitely one of the things that we're taking into consideration. And it will remove that issue now, and in 75 or 80 years when we need to put another tower up. So it'll essentially remove that situation in the future also. So you're always increasing vulnerability when you're taking a tower down, and even more so when you're doing it for an extended period of time.
Mr. Chair, just one point, just go back to Mr. Belter's comment from earlier. I think there's a very valid point with respect to the fact that we typically, as the RDA, sell it for $5, but were it not for the RDA, if the utility was purchasing this, they would have ended up paying $13 a square foot, and I don't think that that's inappropriate that the utility make the RDA whole on their investment, because this is not a development site now. It is a municipal institutional site, and given the importance of this, I think that's probably an appropriate thing to do. The environmental cleanup costs of,
One thing the city water utility
on that site?
will be taking on is that typically the RDA would be responsible for any soil remediation and environmental concerns that would be on the site that the water utility is buying. The water utility is taking that on as their own cost and will not be charging the city or the RDA for that expense. So there is some certain cost savings to the RDA in that effect.
So I think all those things should be factored in, but we try to make the RDA whole is really what we should do.
Typically, we've sold the property for $1, and then we've put in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the remediation just to get the rest of the building built. That's,
Of course, we would still have obligation for cleaning up the existing power site.
yes, we would. If we were not going to sell it to the RDA, or to the water utility,
Yeah.
if we were going to sell it to a private developer, then the city would be on the hook. At this point in time, nobody's willing to spend those kinds of dollars, so the city's been putting those into.
Okay, but so the utility would be responsible for the
Yes.
remediation of both
Yes.
sites? The
Yes.
new site and the
Both sides.
existing site?
Yes, correct. So that does save the city and the RDA about $100,000 approximately in future costs.
Pretty simple math to figure out what the remediation costs, if any, for the new site, so it can just be subtracted from the cost of the actual land, so. We're not going to settle up on a closing date on June 1st or anything.
Right, it really is, the whole idea is so that we
We're
can
just
get
making whole,
CH2M Hill going on the
Right.
final
Design.
design.
Ready for the question?
A discussion?
Mr. Chairman, you also have to ask for public comments.
Public comments? Public here.
Public hearing?
What, if any, input does the RDA have on the design? I know we talked about the various ketchup bottle, corn cob, many multi-legged, versions of water towers last time. Because frankly, if I were the owner of the AccuCom building, has anybody talked to them?
He has attended a couple of at least one of the stakeholder meetings, if not
Okay.
two.
And if somebody were putting something that I felt was ugly behind my building, I'd have some concerns about that. So where are we on the aesthetics of it all?
If I could speak
Sure.
to that. At the last meeting, we made available in the packets all of the handouts
The designs,
that we
right.
prepared for the stakeholders. And at the March 5th Stakeholder Committee meeting, the committee decided that they didn't need to meet again at this point during this preliminary decision-making phase, but that they would like to meet again during final design, because while there was some general agreement on concepts and the importance of aesthetics, nice landscaping, a decorative fence, high-end painting, there wasn't a selected design. And so our plan, the water utilities plan, is to revisit those final design features, painting, color, once the surveying and subsurface investigation and the actual design is moving forward.
Could you remind us what the I thought there were two general designs that were advanced.
There are two types of tower styles that were preferred by the stakeholders. One is called a composite, and that's a tower that has a concrete column that is hollow, and there's a metal standpipe in the center of it that fills and empties the tank, the storage tank. And the other type is a spheroid, which is the one that is very popular, looks like a, a golf ball on top of a tee.
Can I interject and ask a quick question? Then, that is there any requirements in this area, or has there been from the construction standpoint of the buildings surrounding buildings? And would that building standard also apply to the water tower as far as the amount of brick or whatever need to be used?
What?
We did look at all the building standards for the area, existing buildings, and things like that. So we did have a very specific discussion about looking at that, and we would expect to meet or exceed the building standards for the area when it comes to things like cell phone structures and fencing and those types of things. So
How about choice of material
as far as
for the exterior of the structure?
okay, well, it's essentially the composite is going to be concrete with the metal on top, and the spheroid is all metal. So the decision will be more about the painting than it would be about actual material.
There are typically variations on those two designs, and even the most exotic water tower you've ever seen is generally a variation on one of those two.
Here's kind of a scale.
And, as Linda said, one looks like a golf ball on a tee. I've seen a golf ball on a tee on one of those water towers. They do get that unusual, but as far as creativity goes, the design is pretty much, the structural design is pretty much the same.
For the elements of the project that have an architectural finish, like the perimeter fence, the design concept that we proposed to the stakeholders was one similar to that used at the new central garage that has the concrete piers with the brick fascia and then the architectural black wrought iron fencing panels in between. And
Which is very similar to Morton's that we have out there right now.
okay. And there's a small enclosure that will be needed to house the at-grade support equipment for the cell phone company antennas. And that enclosure will have finishes that are compatible with the guidance for the Marion Road, Pearl Avenue redevelopment, which includes a lot of brick and a lot of the things. We took photographs of many of the existing structures that are there now and compared them with some of the pictures that were in the, I think, 2008 design guidance.
Marion Road Design Guidelines.
And there's a lot of similarity. It seems like even there's variety out there, but they're all kind of true to that theme. And all of those building materials are very accessible, and we would want to follow through on that.
My question was really directed at, are we beyond the multi-leg
Correct.
water tower?
Correct.
That I would object to moving that closer to the front of the
That one is not as cost-effective to maintain over the life cycle of the tower as these two designs that made the short list with the committee.
Question on the graphics for the water tower. I mean, we've seen different examples that some are pretty simple, some get pretty elaborate. What's the range in cost for the graphic design, the painting, and if we set a budget that we're going to spend so much on painting this water tower, and the more complicated we get, the more it's going to cost to keep it looking good. Has there been any budget set?
Well, we're still currently, even with an exotic paint job, and the exotic paint job that we prepared a cost estimate for was modeled after the Rosemont water tower that's in Rosemont, Illinois, with the very
Second one right there.
complicated petals and the green stem. And we worked with the paint company that does that work for that particular community. And the incremental increase in painting cost is $150,000 per application. So given technologies the way they are now, you can get maybe 20, 25 years on an exterior paint job. I can't look in my crystal ball and find out if 50 years from now they'll have better products out there. But it's if that type of paint was used with this initial tower project, that money is in the budget. We have some contingency in our budget.
We'll have the ultimate say-so on that.
Well, we have to conform to the guidelines of Marion Road.
Okay.
So not, even on the fencing thing, I'm not sure what fencing is allowed in the Marion Road guidelines.
There's some there around the Morton
Right,
Pharmacy.
but it has, but those have to be, conforming, they're not,
Right.
can't be different. And the council, all that flows up for council approval for, especially if there's any variation. Remember, we had that long discussion on a loft hotel, whether it should be brick or chrome or facing, and it got all the way to the color of the fascia. So it was, the council will ultimately do that.
But my thought is the general goal to make this be as unobtrusive as possible or as gaudy as possible. I slept in a hotel room next to the Rosemont water tower about 3 weeks ago, and it was right out my window. And yes, everybody knows that you're in Rosemont, Illinois, but I thought it was ugly as a mud fence. So if I were building, and that's not my personal view of what the area ought to look like, but if I'm going to invest money in that redevelopment area, I'm going to want something that's going to be commensurate with what's going on.
And you brought up a point that was kicked around at our stakeholder committee meetings. We were the committee was a team divided. Half really felt strongly about having the tower be iconic and a statement about the community or its history, its culture, and half was like, I want it to blend in. I don't even want to know it's there. So there's going to have to be further discussion about that, and I think there are some outstanding people who volunteered to participate on the stakeholder committee, and hopefully they'll be interested in continuing to work with the city.
One thought is, this becomes most visible as you're you're going east on Witzel. It becomes less when the trees are with leaves, but I would hope at some point, whatever designs there are, we can superimpose them as if you're driving down Witzel. So here's what you're actually seeing come into the city.
To Photoshop it into the sky. Right. We did something like that with this handout here, where we Photoshopped in a spheroid tower and took out the existing one.
The distance will be less gaudy.
So, I've seen some of the public art that's been incorporated in the long-lived projects like the highway ramps and that retaining wall by the Two Brothers restaurant, and very tasteful. And, I could imagine living with that for 80 years. So we don't have the answer, I guess.
Well,
we don't have the answer today, but we'll get there.
Just as long as someone's watching. For example, this example of Cabela's and Pick and Save and whatever advertising on it, I think just isn't consistent with what I would want in my backyard if I had just invested in an office building or a bank on the corner in this area. So we've got to be pretty very sensitive to the people who are sinking some money into this long sought-after development area.
Of course, the RDA still has some lots to sell, so we want to keep that value and potential as high as possible.
And you make a good point, and maybe there is an in-between space. Maybe something bland with character, and you think about the Beatamore Bridge. You go under it. I don't know if under it, but
It's cool.
There's unique things there that don't stand. They only stand out because they're not brightly colored, but they're well done. I mean, it's something.
We're all very sensitive to that, and I think the stakeholder committee is very sensitive to that.
That's
too.
good.
We want something that is going to be aesthetically pleasing. It's going to meet the needs of the area, and we understand it's going to be there for 8 years, so we want it. People are interested in seeing when they notice it, and that it has something that it ties things together, and the people that live in the area that will have to walk by it or see it all the time can appreciate it.
From a development standpoint, I think we have an obligation to the RDA to make sure we walk the walk when it comes to your design standards. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to come and seek a variance when we pushback when people ask variances from us.
That's my
With that said, with respect to your comments about the design, Mr. Birmingham, I would suggest that you call, or in your case, you can poke your closest council member and give them your input, because ultimately, beyond the standards that there already exist for Marion Road, it will ultimately be the council's decision, and we'd like to give them some ideas, but it will come from the design group. But it is a very eclectic group of people, and you'd have people with, as Linda said, both sides of, both points of view on that, and they both feel strongly, and this is one of those cases where it's great to be staff, because that's a policy decision, and whatever policy decision that the council makes, I think will be wonderful.
And we'll live with it for 80 years.
And
For
Be it a good decision or a bad decision.
We'll enjoy it for 80 years.
Any further discussion?
Lasky.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
Belter.
No.
Birmingham.
Aye.
Hintz.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Carried 5-1.
No other business, I'd look for an adjournment.
Move to adjourn?
Second? All in favor? Thank you. Take a roll or just aye?
We just go.